Yo, Mr. Le coming at you live and direct with a tutorial on how to do a double exposure. If you are here to do my assignment, please refer to my handout, the double exposure movie poster over yourself. You have two options for this assignment. You're either going to make a movie poster or you're going to create some artwork for yourself. For the movie poster, you are following the parameters and you're only choosing movie titles and themes from the movie ideas that I give you below. So I give you 7 different options. We're going to pretend like a movie company has come, or a production company has come to you to ask for some advertisements, and these are the movies that they are going to create and want advertisements for. If you want to do a photo for yourself, one of the main parameters I have for you here is that it has to be photos taken by you or include you in it. So the big body image that you guys are going to be using, that's going to be where you're going to put the scenery within. So this kind of effect is something that I was inspired by the show called True Detective. So this is a screen capture of the title screen, and you can see that there's a bunch of little different scenes inside the head of Matthew McConaughey. All right. Here's another example here. So this TV show called The Leftovers, they do a double exposure within this guy, and it doesn't just have to be movie posters. You can do it with anything that you want to be kind of artistic or create a graphic for. So here are a couple of different examples. If you attended the Vincent Massey virtual open tour, I created the menu for that tour. So you can see here I have a picture of Vincent Massey, and then I just photoshopped it and I put a bunch of different scenes of school life within the school and kind of did some editing for it. So it's a really cool effect to use, and if you're here to do the assignment, please refer to my handout for what you need to do for it. But I mean, if you're here to just use this effect for a different assignment, by all means. So let's get into it. Alright, so before I actually get into this tutorial, I want to show you a few things that we're going to be working with a lot in this effect. So first of all, you got the opacity, which is what changes how transparent your image is. So I got this layer of myself here, and if I lower the opacity, you can see that I start to become a little bit more transparent. That's an obvious one. That's something that we've used quite a bit in this class, but something that we're going to utilize a lot as well are layer masks. So if you take a look at my layer where I have Anna here, you can see that there is a layer icon, and right beside it is the layer mask icon. So the layer mask icon allows certain parts of your image to be transparent or more opaque, and you really work with white and black here. So basically, if you're using white, the less transparent something is going to become. So clicking on the white, clicking on the layer mask here, and then using the white brush tool, I'm gonna go with like a 25 to 30% opacity for my brush tool. And if I start coloring by the hair where you can kind of see that little mark was, I made it disappear. Now if I go with the opposite color and I go black and I start coloring it in, you can see that she's starting to disappear now, so she's becoming less opaque with that color. You really want to work with the layer mask, because the layer mask allows you to make changes to the transparency without making changes to the actual layer. So if I click on the layer and then I go with that tool, you can see that I'm literally just brushing white over her. So clicking on the layer mask instead will change the opacity of her. So now she's starting to disappear because I'm making her a little bit more transparent because I have the white, or I have the black brush tool on. So if I step back a few times here and I switch over to white and I start to color over her, now I'm making her a little bit more opaque, and now she's a little bit more visible in that background there. Right? So we're going to be working with that a lot. Another example I can show you here is, you can see my hand is not very clearly visible. If I zoom out, you can't really tell that that's my hand. So I'm going to click on my layer of myself here, and then I'm going to click on the layer mask. And then now by changing up the opacity, by coloring it in white on my layer mask, you can see that tiny little white there is starting to appear, and now my hand is starting to become a little bit more visible, like so. And it still allows the background of the nature, the trees and the water, to be seen as well. So it's a really good handy tool if there's specific parts of your body that you want to be really seen. So So we're going to be working with layer masks quite a bit, and let's get into this tutorial. Alright, getting started with this tutorial here, I got a document open up to 8.5 by 11, so check the handout for the size that you need and how you should be setting up your image. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring over my big body model that I want to use to put all the scenery inside of. So I got a picture of myself here, and then you're going to go ahead and just crop your big body model away. To save time, I've already done that here. With this layer, I'm going to call it big body model, big body. Alright, and then something I like to do as well, as you can see the cropping that I did, it's very straight lines here. The edges are very crisp, so I'm just going to switch that up. I'm going to make it a little bit softer, so I'm going to hold control and I'm going to click on the layer icon, not on the text. And you can see it selected everything in my layer here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to select, modify, and I'm going to contract it. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, so I'm going to press Control T. So that has made my edges around my selection just within my selection, and then I'm going to go to select, modify, feather, and I'm going to do about 2 pixels. Alright, now if I press delete, I'm going to delete everything on the inside of me, and that's not what I want to delete. So instead, I'm going to go Control Shift I to do select inverse, and then I'm going to click delete. And now what I did was I just kind of deleted everything on the outside of my selection, but because I had feathered it, I made it softer so it didn't just straight up delete that layer. And then now you can see that my edges are a little bit softer and not as crisp as they were before. That just kind of makes blending a lot easier. Alright, so once you have your big body model on there and you've kind of made your cropping a little bit softer, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my scenery in. So I took this picture at the Spirit Sands here, and I'm just going to make my other layer invisible, and this is what I want to use for the scenery on the inside, because I'm making a poster for the disappeared, and people disappear in the forest sometimes. Ooh, ominous. So this is going to be the image that I'm going to use, and I'm going to rasterize this layer. And something I like to do is I like to make this layer a little bit less opaque, just a tad bit, and I'm going to put it on top of my big body image. And by doing this, I can adjust what parts of the image I want to put into my body. And as you can see, the size of my scenery is not very big. So I'm going to press Control T and I'm going to make my scenery a little bigger. Press OK with that. And then now I can adjust, and I can kind of choose where I want to put, this scenery. So I want a lot of water in there, and I want a lot of trees to be seen, so I'm going to go somewhere right around here so the trees go right up to my head. That looks good. Like it where it is. I can go ahead and make the opacity full again, so now I know where it is, and I'm going to go ahead and make this invisible. Okay, on to the next step. Okay, so your next step now is we're going to make a layer mask for our scenery. So I'm going to press Control, and I'm going to click on my big body model, so I have the selection of just me, and I'm going to go ahead and make my scenery visible again. And I'm actually going to click on my scenery layer, and then I'm going to click this button right down here, which is Add Layer Mask. So I'm going to click that, and you can see it's created a layer mask here in the shape of my big body model. So everything that is white, that means the layer is visible. Anything that's black in this layer mask icon means it's not visible. So this is a really good technique if you want to have only certain parts of your big body model to be exposed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my brush tool, and just to show you what the concept here is, I'm going to make the opacity 100%, and I currently have black selected. If I draw right across my layer mask here, you can see how my hoodie becomes visible, and if you look at my layer mask over here, you can see that little black streak is across my body. So what I'm doing is I'm only exposing certain parts of my layer mask. So if I step backwards and I lower the opacity, now let's go to about 30%, and I'm gonna increase the size of my brush stroke here. When I color it in, you can see that I slowly become a little bit visible here. So let's say it's just my head that I want to be visible here, and maybe my hand as well, so I can make my hand appear. Now if I zoom out, you can see that my head and my hand are more visible, and you can see what my big body model is. Now that's a great technique if you guys like only having certain parts to be exposed. But let's say you want a gradual transparency. Let's say my head's completely visible and then it blends into the scenery. We're gonna do a different technique here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna step back. All right. I'm gonna click my big body model and I'm gonna select this guy again, and I'm gonna open up my my scenery, and I'm gonna press Control C, Control V, and now I have this scenery here in the shape of my body. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a layer mask for this guy. Now, if you notice with this layer mask, it's all completely white, so my entire layer is visible here. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click the gradient tool here, and I'm gonna make sure that my gradient tool is set to the 2 color swatches that I have, the foreground and background. So my foreground and background is black and white, so those are the 2 colors that I'm using now. So now on my layer mask, I'm gonna click and drag, and I'm gonna draw that line there. I should probably switch it around, and I'm gonna turn my big body model visible as well. And when I click on the layer mask and make it visible, you can see that, you know, the bottom of my body is visible. So if I go the opposite way, so I click and drag to the top, now it makes my head visible, and then near the bottom of my big body model, the water is more visible. So that's one technique, and you got to really pay attention to what your layer mask looks like. So I have one situation here where it's a gradual gradient transparency, and then I have another one here where, you know, just certain parts of my body are visible. So like my head and my hands, for instance. Just be very careful with this technique because you are doing brush strokes. And so since my opacity is 31%, if I continuously do one same brush stroke in the same area, you can see that my red hoodie slowly becomes more and more and more and more visible, and the scenery disappears. So this is a good technique to use if only certain parts of your body you want to be seen, like my hands, or, you know, a little bit more of my face. So I'm gonna kind of create more opacity so my head starts to appear a little bit more. But you have to be careful with, because you will get brush strokes like this, as you can see, because of the opacity is so much lower. The more you color in one area, the more opaque it becomes, and so you'll end up seeing brush strokes like this here. So this next step is not really necessary if this is the type of look that you're going for, where the scenery is only within your big body model. So like I showed you this example earlier, here you can see only the scenery is within Matthew's head, and there's multiple sceneries. He's got woods, and he's also got like a factory kind of setting in there, so it's 2 different sceneries in this one head. But if you're going for a look where, you know, the scenery is going past the big body, like here at the bottom with the trees and the mountains and the birds, then this is the necessary steps that you're gonna have to take here. So first of all, I noticed that my big body model was still colorized, and I'm going for the disappeared, so I want that kind of creepy look, right? So I simply just clicked on that layer. I went to adjustments, image adjustments, and then I went to desaturate. You could also go black and white. That's also a good color to choose, but for me, I went with desaturate, and I got this kind of low tone looking image. So what I'm going to do now is I probably want a background. As you can see with the checkered boards, I have no background. So I'm going to click on this adjustments, make a new adjustment, and I'm going to click solid color. I'm going to go to white here, and now I have my background. I'm going to put that right at the bottom there. I probably want to color from my scenery, so I'm going to press Control J, and I just copied my scenery layer here, and I don't need this layer mask, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that layer mask. And now I just have my scenery again. Now I'm going to go back to my background. You know, I'm going to call this background. How about that? Label it background. I'm going to double click on this guy. And now with this color picker open, if I move my cursor over to the scenery layer, I get the eyedropper tool. And let's go with like a darker kind of grayish blue look. Alright, not bad. Okay, press OK, and then that's going to be my background now. Alright, now going back to my scenery copy, since I want some of my scene to be showing up, I probably want like most of it near the bottom, because like it's the water, right? So with this scenery copy layer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm going to make a new layer mask here. And now you can see that my layer mask is completely black. And then I'm going to go back to my brush tool, and I'm going to switch it to white. color white. And something that might be a good idea is to change your brush stroke to a soft brush stroke rather than a hard brush stroke, because then that'll make the edges a little bit softer, as you can see here when I kind of color in the scenery. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the size of my brush stroke here, and if I just kind of slowly brush stroke at the bottom, you can see how the rest of my scene is appearing, but you can still see that the scene within my body is a little bit more clear, a little bit more opaque, and you can kind of see I'm appearing a little bit more. I kind of lost my hand, so if I click back on my layer mask that is for me, I'm gonna go ahead and, you know, color around my hand to show my hand a little bit more here, to make it a little bit more visible. You know, I'm gonna raise the opacity up a little bit, make my hand a little bit more visible and more seen. So again, this step isn't necessary if you want to keep the scene within your body, but I kind of like this where, you know, the scene is showing the ocean, or not the ocean, but the water that, you know, maybe I disappeared into. You don't have to do just one scene layer and then one big body model layer. Like, you can do multiple, you know, double exposures here. So again, this Vincent Massey open house menu that I made, I put many layers inside Vincent Massey. That's why I had to organize myself with folders here, otherwise I would not be able to keep myself organized. And again, my example here, how I have myself, you know, the main leading actor, and then my leading actress also in the double exposure. So keep it creative, try many different scenes, maybe different pictures to put inside the double exposure, and be creative and have fun with it. See you guys.